Hi, everyone. My name is Anya Olson, and this is my first ever episode of my Zoom series titled After the Play Ends, Hanging the Cleats Up, where I get to interview retired collegiate athletes and discuss their struggles with transitioning after they graduate and after they're no longer playing their sport. I'm super excited to be here today with Matt Wiscomb, who I actually played high school soccer with. So he would play on the guys' team, I'd play on the girls' team. So we are always practicing at the same time, super close teams. So we know each other quite well. And our topic today is mental health and finding a new identity after your sport. So, Matt, you have the stage. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Perfect. Well, I was originally born in Salt Lake City, Utah, and to a family of two boys, well, three boys and then one girl. So growing up, sports were obviously, was a big part of our family. We love sports. And so I started playing soccer at a young age. Um, and then I moved to California, like Anya said, and that's where we met. And that's where I played soccer for, I believe, 5 years after that. So, got to experience a little bit of like a different culture with soccer. Playing in Utah is a little different than playing in California. So you experience, I'd call it the highest level. Um, it was always like when you would play in soccer tournaments and stuff, you'd look at California as like, oh, those were the big teams. You'd be scared to play them. So I got to experience Southern California culture, and it was great.
That's my biggest bragging right because I can always say, yeah, I played soccer in California. And everyone's like, "Oh, California girls, you guys are always the best." So that's my
Yeah.
favorite thing to talk about when I say, "Oh, I grew up in San Diego." But that leads me into you're a little bit different with my guest because you didn't play collegiate soccer. Tell us a little bit about that, your experience declining offers and just deciding not to be in that community.
Yeah, it was kind of hard. Especially like I said, playing in California, my whole team at the time, I think it was junior through senior year, my club team was getting recruited. We were going to different showcase tournaments. We were going to different camps as a team, and I even had the chance to play against the youth USA men's national team.
So dope.
So like I was ex
So cool.
yeah, it didn't end well, but it was a cool experience.
What was the score?
um, I think it might have been 6-0.
Okay.
Um, but it was cool. And so, I was exposed to a lot of different schools and coaches. But for me, I had always had this idea in mind that I was going to leave the country to do a service mission. And so soccer was kind of second to that. But I had always wanted to kind of play, especially being surrounded by a bunch of players who were being recruited. I kind of felt left out most of the time. Um, and so that made it hard. And I remember specifically one time in high school, it was my junior year, and um, I contemplated quitting at one point because I had had enough, and I didn't really, I didn't know how I was going to keep going. And I just remember thinking about it and talking to my parents, and ultimately I decided to keep playing through my senior year, and I'm glad I did because I don't know what I would have done without soccer. So that's kind of it. I also had I had been in conversation with a coach from Occidental College in Los Angeles, just a little D3 school. But ultimately, like I said, I kind of cut ties and decided to do my service mission. So it really ended my career there after senior year.
So let's put that into perspective a little bit because I just had my last game, my collegiate game, and I had known this was coming for my entire career. I had been like, okay, well, when I reach senior in college, I will no longer like I'll play my last game. So I had been preparing for this for years. So how tell us what your mindset was when you played your last high school game or you played your last club game and you were like, I'm done and I'm 18. Um, that's really that's really, really tough. So tell us a little bit about that.
So my last game I played was with my club team in it, and it was really bad. It was a bad way to go out. So I don't really remember it the game I remember most was the high school quarterfinals. Um, I was the captain of the team, and I had been playing injured basically the whole season. I picked up an injury the summer before with my club team, and it just kind of lingered on and never went away. So I think it was midway through the second half, I went down and I couldn't run anymore, and I kind of knew that was it because we were losing. I believe it was either 2-1 or 1-0. Um, so I knew that was it for me, and I didn't know, maybe we could have pulled that out and maybe I could have played in the next game, but we ended up losing. So as much as it was like a feeling of wow, that's it. After talking to my parents about kind of moving on from soccer, it was also a feeling of you've spent so much time playing this sport, going to practices, going to tournaments, traveling. What are you going to be able to do now? And some of my hobbies are like fishing and I loved the beach. So like I was like, wait, I'll be able to go out, get to hike a little bit, go fishing, experience things that on the weekends when I'd be playing soccer, I'd be able to do now because there's time for it. So it was kind of a period of my life where I was gonna try and figure out what it was I was gonna do.
First of all, I remember watching that game. To everyone listening, the entire women's soccer went and watched the entire varsity men's soccer at my high school, and we were heartbroken when they lost this game because we loved the senior class so much. So that game is very near and dear to me. But I agree, like there's always the mindset of like, okay, well, this is over, but what's next? And it's a really optimistic way of thinking about it and being like, well, I never had time for this. What do I have time for now? So let's jump into you being in college now. You're not playing a sport. How has that affected your mental health? How have you felt a little bit alone, left out? What are ways you've coped with that?
So I think the biggest way that it's affected me is I go to the University of Utah, so it's a big school. Um, I do not know anyone I pass when I'm walking around the campus. And so what I've realized is if you're not part of a club, a frat, a sorority, or some sort of athletic team, it's really hard to make friends. Um, and so that's been hard. The fact that I go from class to class and there's people in there who do play sports together, who are rooming together, who, you know, experience this college life together, and I'm kind of on the outside because I don't do any of those things. So that's been kind of hard. Um, but at the same time, I look at my life and I think about all the good things I'm doing. I have a bunch of jobs. I work 3 jobs, and it's great because I'm getting a lot of exposure to what I'd like to get into in the future. And also it leaves me time to I love to boulder. So I get to boulder on the side and experience a little something different that I didn't do growing up. So it's been definitely hard. And I do tell myself sometimes that I want to go be the kicker for the football team. Is it going to happen? I don't know. I'd like to
An
try, but I'm
idea.
not doing anything to prepare, right? Exactly. It's an idea. But there are always moments where either I sit down to watch the football game or the basketball game, and I think to myself, man, like that'd be so cool to represent your school in that way as an athlete. Um, and I just can't do it because number one, I don't have time. It's hard for me to in high school. It's hard for me to manage soccer, family, work, and personal life. So I'm glad I don't play a sport, but there are definitely moments when I think to myself, man, what could be different if I did play a sport?
For sure. I guess that's always a double-edged sword and kind of like back and forth in your head of like, oh, what else could I have done? Where else would I be right now? Um,
Yeah.
but this podcast specifically after the play ends, I want to help current athletes or honestly current college students who maybe decided they didn't want to play a sport or they're struggling with knowing how important that sport was to them for so long and they had to say goodbye. So Maybe using your experience, referencing your experience, or just giving some advice, what would you say to those students?
It's a good question. Um, I don't know. I This might be kind of dark, but it's the whole saying of all good things eventually come to an end. And I don't know if I truly believe that. Um, but my biggest advice that I would give is be open to being uncomfortable. Um, with anything new for me personally, I get uncomfortable. Moving to San Diego was one of the most uncomfortable things I've ever done in my life. Going on my service mission was beyond that, right? Um, so I've done a lot of uncomfortable things in my life, and I look back on them now with a lot of gratitude to the experiences that I had experienced. And so that would probably be it. Just be open to new experiences and don't shy away from them when they come.
Yeah. How was your first experience? Like you said, bouldering. How was that uncomfortable? How did that like really challenge you? And that was the first sport, I guess you could say, that you've done since soccer. So, for anyone who doesn't know, bouldering is indoor rock climbing, and the walls get about, what would you say, like 12 feet high,
Yeah, could
something
be
like
higher.
that. So there's rock climbing you can do with a rope where you go really high and you're attached, but bouldering is basically free climbing on a wall. And there's a lot of indoor gyms, especially in Salt Lake City, Utah, which is where Matt's from. So tell us a little bit about how that bouldering challenged you and how like that really, really was the first thing you've done since soccer.
Well, starting bouldering, there's obviously like a skill gap and a strength gap. In bouldering, you use a lot of muscles that you don't typically train.
Especially
And so I
muscles
remember
you
going,
don't have from soccer.
exactly. Yeah, it's all upper body.
Yeah.
So if you're not in the gym very often, it's pretty hard. But I remember going into it and I couldn't even do a pull up. And I was surrounded by people who made it look easy. And
Yeah.
then I'd hop on the wall and do the same climb and couldn't start it. So it was pretty intimidating because you're surrounded by all kinds of people in the gym. And I think it's probably pretty similar in like a normal exercising gym where you're surrounded by people who are more experienced, less experienced beginners. So that beginning stage was really tough because I was always falling off. Um, I wasn't climbing as smooth as some guys make it look, and um, it's not easy. So it takes time to get to that point where you're like, yeah, I'm pretty good. I feel pretty comfortable. So it was hard, but I had support. I started climbing with my older brother and his girlfriend, and having those people with me while I was there to like show me, but also be like, hey, good climb after, finishing a climb really helped out.
Awesome. So I also want to put this into perspective for the viewers. I've also gone bouldering quite a few times, and one of the most amazing things about bouldering is the community. Um, they're the most encouraging people ever. Random people will just come up to you and be like, "Dude, good climb." It's like a really gratifying experience. So let's put that in perspective of soccer and how like you were always in an environment of people being like, yeah, dude, good pass, good shot, and then moving that to bouldering and how that's kind of filled a void for you.
I think it's just like the gratification of completing something. Um, After the games, especially at a youth level, you get to see all the parents and they're like, "Hey, good game, good game. Hey, Maddie, good stuff." Um, Stuff like that, and even like scoring a goal. You know the rush of it. You've scored some bangers in your time, right?
Thanks.
Um, but no, so like there's a finish hold at the top of the boulder usually, and so they're graded from V1 to V13, and um, I remember climbing my first V6, and I was halfway up the wall, and I had been working on this boulder for a couple weeks, and I just remember my legs were shaking, and I couldn't stop shaking. I don't know why. I wasn't scared, but it was just intense. And I finally reached the top of the wall and I jumped down and there were two girls next to me and they said, "Hey, that was such an awesome climb. Good job." And I was like, "Thanks. That felt pretty good." Like that was my first V6. That's how you know you're improving. Um, so yeah, it definitely does fill a void of accomplishment with something that isn't like school or like doing something with family. It's your own personal, I guess you can call it like a pride. It's a very proud moment when you can finally do that. So yeah.
Yeah, but sports in general are very prideful. So I
Yeah.
definitely feel like athletes, especially who thrive off attention like that and positive attention, need something to fill that. But I love that we talked about where you are now, but I'd love to talk about that in between stage you have between graduating high school, stopping your sport, and then going to the U before you climbed. How did you feel? How was your mental health? Were you feeling in a lost place? Were you struggling? How is that for you?
Yeah. Well, when I came home from my service mission, it was during COVID, so everything was locked down. So my first semesters of school were online.
Hmm.
Um, and so that was my college experience to start off, and it was kind of strange. And I didn't really have a social life, and so that made it hard. Um, Later on down the road, I remember I was looking for some things to do to stay healthy. I don't love running on the road. It's kind of boring. So I turned to the mountains. My dad's a trail runner. He loves to run, so I started running with him, and eh, it was okay. Didn't really get much from it. It was just like, oh, dad's going running, let's go.
For an
Yay.
athlete that
Kind of
ran
kind of
so
thing.
much, soccer players hate running. It's so funny.
Yeah, it's true. So I didn't really get into that. Um, so I got a membership at the gym and started going. But again, it's that learning curve where if you don't really know what you're doing, you feel awkward. And I felt awkward because I didn't have anyone to really train me. I had never really been in the gym as soccer players. For some reason, you don't go to the gym very often in high school,
No,
and so you don't learn how. Um,
only the
so that made it
football players get
hard.
to go to the gym.
Exactly. They had a nice gym and we didn't get anything. So that made it hard. And so I started to turn to things like fishing. I picked up fly fishing, and in Utah there's tons of streams and rivers that you can fish. So I got into that a little bit. Slacklining and music honestly helped me a lot. There were times when I just needed to escape and kind of run away from those demons that you face of feeling lonely and turn to music. And sometimes you have to find that coping mechanism. Might not be the best, but we're all human and we need time to figure things out. So yeah, there was a really long period of time where I felt alone.
And I think that that's the struggle that most athletes go through. And needless to say, it might be from ending their college sport and it might be from ending their high school sport. But regardless, when you play a sport for 14 to 18 years or more, like there's going to be, no matter how many years it is, you're still going to have the same experience. So I'm really glad we were able to get to pick your brain and to talk about how you've coped after your high school sport. And I think that your advice can help a lot of current athletes who are graduating high school, a lot of current athletes graduating college, because no matter what, like a couple of years isn't gonna be that much of a difference. So I would finally like to talk about how the media has helped you in a negative or positive way. Um, for me, I see a lot of TikToks, a lot of Instagram reels. I even follow quite a few YouTubers who played a collegiate sport and who are trying to give advice to athletes because there's no guidebook to being a retired athlete, especially when you stop when you're 18, 19, in your 20s, and you don't stop when you're 30s and 40s because not everyone goes pro. So, how has the media affected you at all in this transition?
Um, that's a good question. I mean, I follow a lot of sports. I think that's been the most interesting thing about it is I've always been a fan of college football and soccer. Any version of soccer. It could be the French league, it could be the league in Spain, or especially the league in England. I follow a team called Arsenal. Um, so like there was always that, but I think something interesting that's kind of happened is my brain has been open to different sports like basketball, and I even started watching hockey, which is kind of strange because it wasn't something that I typically showed interest in high school. Um, and I think a lot of that has to do with exposure, especially out here. Like I've been able to go to different events, basketball games with the Utah Jazz, hockey games with the Utah Grizzlies. Um, and so that's been interesting to kind of open up and accept other sports and kind of feel the vibe of what that sport's about. And then, like you said, TikTok, I all the videos I get are soccer. um, it could be transfer rumors about players who are going to different teams, or like a highlight reel of a specific player, um,
Yeah.
whatever it is. But I'm surrounded by it all day long,
Make
and
you feel less alone. Like you're
it
still
does. It really does. Yeah, it does. It's really cool.
yeah. Is there a platform you use more? Is it TikTok or YouTube or maybe just like
Probably YouTube. I
streaming?
mean, I listen to a lot of soccer podcasts. I'm obsessed with the US national team, and I think a lot of that obsession has to do with the fact that all the players that are playing are my age.
Yeah.
It's
It's
kind of
really
crazy.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a player that I'm in love with. His name is Brendan Aronson. He's the coolest guy I ever. Plays for a team in England called Leeds. Um, and he's 22, like me. And so I think there's a connection there, even though he doesn't know who I am. I feel like there's a connection there where it's like, you know, in a different life we could be friends, sort of thing.
I also feel like you know him because you guys are 22. You probably had similar life experience and you're hearing your podcast about him. So you're like, you know things about him. So like you kind of feel like you're friends on some
Yeah.
aspect. You can kind of live through that.
Well, for sure. I mean, one of my dreams is to go to England one day and either live there for like I guess it can't be the summer because it's off season, but it's got to be during the season and be able to go to all these different stadiums, but specifically um, go to watch a Leeds game and bring my American flag so that the two American players on Leeds and their coach can come say what's up.
Nice.
I would love that. That's a dream of mine.
Nice. I love it.
Yeah.
Um, well, I would actually like to end with if you have any thoughts, any words of wisdom you would have given to yourself when you um before your transition and kind of just some advice to yourself or any advice that you would give to someone going through something similar.
Oh, advice.
I know it's such a hard thing to say because everyone is so different and things that help some people may not help other people.
Yeah. Um, if I had to tell myself something back to when I was in high school playing soccer, I think it would be to enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
I think too often with stuff we love, it becomes a job.
Yeah.
Um,
Especially if you
and
play
that's
since you're 3 or 4, it's a job.
yeah, and that's I think that's when the regret starts to set it like fade in a little bit to something you love. Um, Bouldering hasn't become a job for me because I'm able to moderate it and I'm kind of my own boss.
Mhm.
Whereas in soccer, you have a coach sometimes who can make your experience better or worse. Um, but I think a lot of like with anything we do, it's what you life's what you make it, right? You can decide to pursue something, but pursue it in a healthy way where it's you're putting yourself first and that thing kind of second.
Yeah.
And I understand that, sometimes if your desire is to go professional, that you kind of do have to maybe tweak that a little bit and do things where you might be pushing yourself to a breaking point, which is okay. I think, in some aspects. But for me, I knew I wasn't going to make it to the pros. So I kind of had this realization where it was like, well, it's going to end someday.
Mhm.
So enjoy it while you have it because you're not going to have it forever. So
Yeah.
I think that would be the biggest thing is just don't look at the things you love in life, don't look at them negatively.
Yeah.
Really try and appreciate them while you have them.
Get the most out of them for sure.
Exactly. Yeah.
Great advice. Thank you so much for joining me, Matt. It was a pleasure talking to you. And this was my first episode of After the Play Ends, Hanging the Cleats Up. Thanks so much.
Thank you.